It's an honor to be joined by Lydia Greene. And Lydia, I came across your content on TikTok. I guess it's been a while now, actually. And
Yeah,
yeah, very familiar with your work with Back to the Vax. And but for people that don't know, if you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background before we get into the fun that's happening in Alberta.
sure. So I am a nurse in Alberta. I live in the Rocky Mountains. This is probably as specific as I'll get. I do work for AHS right now as an LPN. Um, I used to work in long-term care and the Emerge. Now I'm just at the Emerge, and then I also work in another non-Alberta healthcare site as well as a LPN. And yeah, this scandal's interesting. I mean, our healthcare system has been in a dumpster fire for quite a while.
Hey, good morning.
We have entire ER closures. We have like a map where you can track all the ER closures where there's just nobody, there's not enough nurses, there's no doctor on call, and they just have to shut down an entire ER. So it's kind of been the state of things for a while anyway.
And then obviously we get the big bombshell about a week ago in the Mail and Hi Delaney as well
Mhm.
that's viewing right now. And we get the big bombshell in the Globe and Mail that Danielle Smith might have fired the top ranking official because of an investigation into private contracts that was going to be announced.
Yeah.
And that's certainly a way to go. I don't know. Maybe she thought it would blow over, but yeah, I don't know. What were your thoughts when you started seeing this? There's been a lawsuit since, but
Yeah.
yeah, what are your thoughts?
I don't have a lot of faith just seeing the state of politics right now and how slippery these politicians are and how they don't seem to be held accountable for anything right now. I don't have a lot of faith in this going anywhere personally. I will be shocked if it does. I will be shocked if anyone is disciplined or punished in any way for what's happened. I am confident they'll get away with it. um and that's unfortunate. But I mean, the timing is definitely suspect. I mean, and they fired the board twice already. The whole entire AHS
The
board
whole
has been,
board.
yeah, it's been done twice already. And then after the CEO um, got fired, then they fired, and then the board said, "Hey, they fired the board again." So like, it looks very suspicious. I mean, that just
I
is
mean,
weird timing. How unfortunate for the UCP government that that happened.
I think anytime you can fire a board twice, you got to do it, right? So, I mean, it's
Hmm.
interesting. I mean, some of the details. So I'll just read this. This was the original article. Premier Danielle Smith's government dismissed the head of Alberta Health Services 2 days before she was scheduled to meet with the province's Auditor General to discuss her investigation into procurement contracts and deals for private surgical facilities. And the letter is that it also alleges that the chief of staff or the then chief of staff interfered in AHS contract negotiations. Um, Now, another interesting detail here is that members of Alberta's government received gifts from a company that imported generic pain medication from Turkey for the health authority. So I think right now, part of the reason why I wanted to focus on this topic, I mean, going back to the fall, or was it fall, the Luigi stuff that went down in the States, there's a lot of angst right now with healthcare in general, both in Canada
Yeah.
and the US. And when you see things like this, I mean, I think people are pretty frustrated and they want to have their voices heard.
Yeah, especially when it's such a misappropriation of funds. They'll attack like the frontline workers all the time with cutbacks. They'll like remote communities can't find people because they only want to offer like zero point 0.5 lines or 0.75 lines. They never want to give anyone a full-time line because
Mm,
they want to be able to plug and play all their employees to prevent overtime. And
mhm.
so why would anyone? I live in the middle of nowhere, a 2 hour drive, like a small city on either end of a 2 hour drive. It's literally the middle of nowhere. Why would anybody uproot their life and move here if you can't even have a full time job, right? And so that's part of the problem with a lot of the remote communities not having healthcare is that they're not willing to offer incentives for anyone to move here. I work here because I live here. I did my online schooling to
Hmm.
become an LPN because it was the only way I could become a nurse. I like doing RN remotely is virtually impossible from where I live. So why would anyone move here? Like, really? And so like they do things like this to try to like save money and they get to brag about how much overtime they saved. Meanwhile, like healthcare is just like a huge dumpster fire. And then they want to misappropriate, 75 million for Tylenol that nobody even got. And then at the end of the day was deemed not safe enough to give out. But like, I can't have a full time line. And it's silly. Like I don't know. And
No, it
silly's
is.
being nice.
And still he's being nice. I mean, one of the things that really perplexes me the is travel nursing in Canada. We like, for example, in Ontario, I know personally, or a young nurse that's, and again, we need nurses in Ontario. It's not like it's not like we don't need
Hmm.
them here. But New Brunswick, and actually, there was a big article in the Globe this summer about it as well, about the amount that they spent on travel nursing, right? And it's like what
It's
I don't,
ridiculous.
right? Like we're competing within our own
I asked an
country.
RN, and she was a fresh RN. She didn't have a whole lot of experience, maybe like 5 years, if that. And she was a travel nurse, and she was just finishing her term with us. And on her basically her last day, I was like, real facts, like, what do they pay you to come here?
Yeah.
And it was like $106 an hour to work in our location. So they'll pay an RN to work $106 an hour and then not give a full-time line to anyone in our own community. It's so insane. And then but again, because like they're not paying overtime, they're like, we're saving money, and it's not saving money at all.
And keep in mind that $106 per hour, that's going to the nurse herself or himself,
And
right?
then there's
And
the
then the
agency
company,
cut.
exactly, the agency above them, right? So
Yeah.
in Ontario, I know like it can be up to $300 an hour that's being paid to the agency. And that's a lot of money to avoid overtime pay. But then also the big thing for them is the pension liability as well. And I say liability, just using that in a financial context, not not saying that pensions are a
And then don't even
liability.
get me started on how little our our HCAs and LPNs are paid. Like it's sad. It is sad what I make as a new LPN. 27 an hour.
27 an hour, and that
27 an hour. And in Alberta, the scope of LPNs is very broad. Like, there really isn't too many things that I'm not allowed to do compared to an RN. I'm doing IVs. I'm doing all of it, you know? So, like, pick line dressings,
oh,
drawing, blood samples from picks. Like, there's really not anything that I can really think of. I make sure if there's like a C test acuity that is higher, especially with pediatrics, then I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna defer to you. Like give it to the RN, right? Like I don't
mhm.
I don't want that responsibility. I'm not paid enough for that responsibility. But if there's no one else around to do it, guess who's doing it? I'm doing it. I'm in a remote site providing emergency care. You have to do what you
You
have to
got to
do.
do it. Exactly, exactly. I'm just going to make some room here for my co-host, the Unrepped Founder. In the spirit of Do It
Hello.
Live, he joined a little bit late, but I want to make room for him to introduce himself and jump into the
Sure.
conversation. Jerry, how's it going?
I'm good. Hello, Lydia. Sorry for being slightly late. I think I can't turn on my camera because I don't have enough followers. So anybody listening, if you want to
Oh,
give me some follows, appreciate that.
There you go. There you go.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I am calling in from the U.S. right now. So I am a Canadian who has been living in the U.S. for a big part of my life. So it's been kind of interesting to see the discourse and dichotomy, across borders, especially in times like right now. And yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to hear these things because one of the reasons why I came down south is because even where I live, which is just north of Toronto, getting access to family doctors it can be very challenging. I've had a family doctor when I was high since I was in high school, and just she was great, but almost never available, right? When you talk about the availability of healthcare resources across different provinces, um, we have, I think, in Canada a pretty big problem of like the population sparsity, right? Like so, basically, you have like these clusters of people living in one place, and then if you're not in a cluster, then it becomes a lot harder to get access to amenities that people in cities might have a lot easier access to. So yeah, so that's I guess a little bit about me and some of my thoughts. And thanks for coming on the show, and I'm happy to be here and chat.
Yeah, no. And thanks to Ash for sharing the live and the comments. Definitely see it. No, I think, I mean, you make a good point about population. Unfortunately, that's just like a Canadian issue, just in general, right? Like, we're not a very. That's why we're a perfect target to be the 51st state, right? Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
population of California across the country, right? So, I mean, that's just those challenges exist. But I think Lydia made a really good. Uh, when you were talking about the incentives and incentivizing people to live and work in certain areas, that's very important. I mean, let's even take this outside of like a very like the very serious healthcare context. Like look at sports for example. Like I'm a basketball fan, and the Toronto Raptors have a hard time attracting players in free agency. And Toronto is a world
Yeah.
class city, but if you're an NBA player and you can make 20, $30 million living in Los Angeles or Miami or any other warm city, uh, they take it 9 times out of 10, right? So it's something that we understand in a lot of other contexts. I'm not really sure why it's not following through when it comes to basic needs for our population.
Yeah, I think another big challenge too is this is something that I'm actually actively working on. I'm trying to, as you guys may or may not know, the job market, especially for young software engineers, people who are working in IT and technology, job market's kind of tough in Canada, right? But I'm currently in California myself, and the race for top talent has never been hotter. And a lot of this top talent actually comes from Canadian universities. And so I'm kind of doing two things. One is I'm trying to help connect these American companies with Canadian talent. But the second thing I'm thinking is like, okay, well, like, why can't we have top companies set up in Canada, right? You talk about attracting people to like, location is still very key. Will and I both have a real estate background. And, the first thing you know in real estate is, location. And it's, when you talk about whether it's subsidizing healthcare workers or anyone else to try to convince them to live in places that are not like as desirable compared side by side, um, there's multiple factors at play, right? It's not always just the weather or just community or pay or whatnot. Everyone makes decisions on a variety of different things. It could be family, it could be lifestyle, lots. It could be culture. And for me, I'm trying to figure out like how do I convince these companies to actually like come to Canada and put money in our communities, right? Because we know that there's a strong collection of talent, and actually in the U.S., I think a lot of Canadians don't know this. A lot of Americans don't know this either. But a lot of the biggest technology companies, whether it's even TikTok or Google or Meta, like they hire a lot of Canadians, and the thing is, it's once people come down south, it's harder to go back up. So. So yeah, I think this kind of touches on a broader topic of, it, how do we convince, like, what are the factors that kind of bring people from A to B? And if we are A and everyone's moving to B, then what are the incentives you can give beyond simply money to keep someone there, right? Like, so, one of the biggest issues across, Canada is, the birth rate, right? Birth rates have been falling. And you think, why have birth rates been falling? Well, they're falling actually kind of across the world. And a big part of it is that it's not very like having kids is a very stressful thing, and with the financial condition of most people, with the lifestyle of two working parents, like that's really hard to support. um or the idea that, oh yeah, I should just have kids now, for a lot of people today is like, wow, that's really hard. Like, okay, well, if I have kids, then how am I going to pay for childcare? How am I going to do this and that? I don't know. I think these all tie into like bigger themes of like, how do we make life easier for normal people, right? Because the last 20 years have been really, really good to people with access to money and with access to assets and capital. But for the working person who's reliant on, going to their job every day, 9 to 5 for a paycheck, I think that social contract has a lot of flaws and holes.
Yeah. And you can bring people from other countries here, but they feel the same way when they get here. A lot
Hmm.
of people are sold the Canadian dream or the American dream and they get here and they're like, I can't afford to live here. A lot of people are going back home because they're like, "Oh my god, this isn't what I thought at all." Like everything's expensive. I have to work all the time. It's freezing cold here. Like, what am I here for? And so you're actually seeing like a tide of immigrants move back to where they came from. So even that's, and then even, so you have like, I'm a first gen kid, and I think you are too, Will.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Me too.
yeah. And so I'm an anomaly in that I have three kids. Like most of my friends only have one or two. So even the first generation of immigrants, their children are not having a lot of children. So that's really a short-sighted stopgap for the population issue. But the corporations don't want to give people the things they need to incentivize them to have children, which is being able to buy a house and not letting foreign influence come in and buy up all the real estate and then sell it back to us so that we can't afford to live in a country that we're all citizens of. Like that's insane to me. That happened to Vancouver, that's happened to Toronto, that's happened to Edmonton now. Like you can't afford to buy a house. So why would anybody want to have a family? So now you're
Yeah.
beholden to your mortgage and you're mortgage poor and you can't even see the children you have. Like it just makes no sense. Like I'm very fortunate that I moved into a community that not many people can tolerate and actually leave because it's so isolated that I actually bought a house probably for like 1980s prices. Okay? And I'm very lucky, but I have that comes at a cost to me too, in that it's very isolating. I'm away from my family. I have to drive really far if I want to go to a city. I don't have access to the recreational activities that most people have access to in a city, so I have to kind of make my own fun, you know. So that comes with a price too. It's not for everyone. You can't just be like, well, I'll just live in a tiny little town and in the middle of nowhere and make do because it's hard for people. A lot of people leave here because it's depressing. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's not an answer, or terms for
Yeah.
in terms of that, but like something's got to give, and greedy corporations have to realize like they have to pay more money, and B, our governments have to realize that there's a huge housing crisis right now.
Yeah, and like Ash is making the point that this is Canada's story outside of major cities, and it's true. I think like look, as someone from Toronto, like you think Canada is Toronto, like the world, like outside of Toronto, the world doesn't exist for the
It's
most part.
not.
You're like what? Like there's other parts of Canada, like so like, and I actually what I say a lot of the time is Toronto's not Canada. Like Toronto's Toronto. We have our own thing going on here, and it's very disconnected from the experience that so many Canadians have. And, you know, I think that should be part of the conversation as well, that we should talk about what it's like. We should normalize the conversation of what life is like in Canada because, yeah, there's different considerations to be made. Because I know a lot of people, oh yeah, we're going to move out of Toronto, we're gonna go live, country living. Well, I mean, if you're from Toronto, like, do you know what that's like? Like, do you really have a good understanding of that, right? So,
Yeah.
it's not just TikTok.
And then
You
depending
know,
on the climate too, like what you think you're gonna have a garden, good luck.
Mhm.
Like
no, right.
where I live, it's called Zone 2A. I can grow potatoes and carrots reliably, and nothing
Reliable.
interrupts it. Like you're not gonna have these like people have this idea like I'm just gonna go homestead. Like that's another movement I'm seeing.
Oh
It's
yeah,
almost
yeah.
like a cosplay of homesteading in a lot of cases,
Well, to
because it's
follow up on
really
that
not that
idea,
easy. And
sorry to interrupt.
well, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, sorry. I'll let you finish first. My bad.
Yeah, most people don't even live in an area where you can sustainably do that in Canada. Like the
Hmm.
further north you go, like most of our population is kind of centralized around that border. But you go any further north than that, you're not gonna be able to do that reliably.
Well, what I was gonna say is, I feel like, there should be some conversation, not just about like what is, like, what is the current situation and quality of life, but there should be more conversation about what should be, right? Like, what should we as citizens expect and hold our leaders and our leaders, our politicians, and and our neighbors. What kind of community should we live in, right? What kind of, because if we agree that declining birth rates is an issue, which also is sort of, I guess. Funny is a bad word, but I don't know. It's strange because I remember growing up, people are like, "Oh my God, there's going to be overpopulation," and now we're very concerned about declining birth rates. But yeah, like I think we should be asking, what kind of life should everyone be entitled to, right? Do we have because down here in the US, I my perception of the culture here, having lived so long here, is the life that you're entitled to is basically like you have to, like, you just have to work and be happy. I think if you study like American history, that's been a really big part of the founding ideology, and I think that's fine for people who want to do that. But there's obviously a lot of people who want to contribute to society in other ways. Um, and sometimes these ways aren't necessarily the most financially rewarding, but we need these people, right? Whether they be healthcare workers or maybe they're service people. Like we want to go to restaurants and we want and have good service. We want to go to public facilities, have them be clean, and I think there's not a lot of conversation about what kind of life people should have, and we often operate around the world that we live in right now. And I've always believed that like your mind creates the reality, right? So you will get the
Well,
world that you want.
I mean, I'll just say, like, I know you're talking about the life that we should have. I think the world's changing so fast that we don't even we're not really sure where things are going, right? Like all we know right now is that things are regressing. Like this is millennials will be the first generation to be worse off than their parents in like 200 years or something like that, right? So
Mm.
I think there's the dissonance and the coming to grips with that reality. Like, things aren't as good. Things aren't as good as they used to be. But then there's the change, right? So you talked about AI, and then actually interesting with AI in medicine and healthcare. Uh, I think, like, interestingly enough, AI is better positioned to replace doctors than it will nurses and PSWs, as we would call them in Ontario, right? Um, like that's really, I think that's really the end game in healthcare in Canada. I don't think there's any other option. Like I look at Ontario and I see that we're expanding access, we're expanding the role of the pharmacist and nurse practitioners in our healthcare system, which is great because we need all the help we can get. But when I look at it, you kind of see how it's being set up. I'm pretty sure that Shoppers Drug Mart is going to become the first point of contact for family medicine because they have the money to invest in the AI or partner with the other big companies to and the platform to distribute the AI effectively across the province, right? In terms of the retail locations and giving people access. So when I look at it, I say, well, Shoppers Drug Mart's probably going to be your doctor, and then from there, obviously, we still have hospitals, and that's how we're going to sort of supplement the healthcare system. And it's a bit of an interesting idea. Again, sometimes what's the line between insight and conspiracy? I don't know, but I do think it just sort of makes sense to me. I don't know if anybody else agrees.
I agree. I think that's where it's going for sure. But in saying that, a lot of small communities don't have chain pharmacies.
Mm.
Um, like our little pharmacies, our two little pharmacies, they're a chain per se in that they're like the smaller, like Guardian and
Hmm.
what's the other one? They're the smaller companies that pharmacies can like utilize to buy the generics and stuff.
Hmm.
Mm.
And they're privately owned that way, kind of like I don't know what are some other franchises that kind of do that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
but then
it's
what
not
stops a
shoppers,
yeah, but
and
then
so
what
those
stops a
people
shop?
won't have it.
But then what stops the shoppers from taking over the location? Just saying like, look, virtual doctor's office. We'll assess you. We'll get your prescription. We'll get it sent to your house. Like
Yeah,
that virtual
I guess if you do
office.
it remotely from your
Yeah,
home, like online, we already have that. Like we have Rocket Doctor and Telus Doctor, and a lot of
Mm.
people are utilizing online doctor services as well because they just have to
yeah,
wait at home for that phone call, right? And then another thing that they're trying to do, because this is what's happening in Alberta anyway, is like they're saying like people are dying waiting for their referrals and stuff. It's because those referrals are not actually being passed on. So another
mm,
another way they're gonna start putting more on nurses, and this is just classic broadening the scope of nurses to the point where they burn out,
yeah,
is making the RNs be able to do the referral so that
yeah.
it's their responsibility, so it doesn't fall through the cracks, that they can also do the referral so that you don't miss your cancer referral or whatever, and you don't die waiting, which could possibly benefit. But I just think that's just another shitty thing we're doing to nurses, putting more on their plate, because if you work in that environment, you can't do anything extra. Like, I know it sounds weird to say, like, but as soon as you do something that's out of your scope, that becomes your job. And so you have to be very conscious of like
Mm,
the work that you take on in a healthcare setting, because if you do it, it's your job now. And like,
mm.
same with this referral thing, like they can do it, and then pretty soon it's going to be they have to do it. And I just think that's a horrible idea.
That's an interesting Pandora's box situation. And I know Ash is making the point that in the 90s, we didn't have these healthcare issues in these same small rural towns. That's an interesting thought. I don't know. Sometimes looking back on, just I'm 31, so trying to remember what the 90s were like. I don't know if I have a very rosy image of what the 90s were actually like.
It had its problems, but it was also a lot of fun.
Yeah, to me, it's like it was the best time ever, but I don't know. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think also like when you talk about that creep, like I made a video on here with a bit of a radical idea about the trade or the impending or hopefully not impending trade war, where it was like, look, if we need more doctors, um, why don't we, be aggressive and make, immigration essentially a path to citizenship, immediate path to citizenship for American doctors, especially those from red states, and say, look, guys, we'll pay you XYZ above market and really sort of try to shift the dynamics, right? Like, I think, I don't know, it's a bit of a out there idea, but I think it's something like, why not be aggressive? Like, why are we doing travel nursing? Like, why is New Brunswick taking nurses from Ontario, or Ontario taking nurses from Alberta? Like, if we need stuff, well, why don't we go compete with the US?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
even bridge programming, right? Because a lot of people in rural communities become LPN not because they couldn't do a bachelor of nursing. Um, it's because there's no accessibility in terms of getting that education, especially if you're a parent. You can't really move away from your children and like go to school. There is only one online bridge program in all of Alberta. And right now there's a freeze because there's too many people that have signed up for it and they have to let them finish up before they accept more because it's a part-time program. You kind of do it, you have like up to 5 years to finish, but you can finish in 3 if you want. And I just think it's crazy that we don't have this offered by more post-secondary because there's such a huge issue with an RN shortage specifically, especially when you have these smaller communities. You do need two RNs at night in my area, and I live in a very small community, and then two in the day. And I just don't know why they don't make it more accessible. It's crazy. It's a really easy way, and the skills are there with the LPNs. It's more of like the textbook knowledge. Like we're doing most of the skills that RNs already do.
But like, why do you think like I have some insight in it just in some of my dealings through business into some of the way that hospitals work and stuff like that, and it does astound me the ability to miss low hanging fruit. And I don't mean that to be critical because there's a lot of people that work in hospitals. Obviously, they care a lot. Like they care. It's not they don't care. They do care. But the
Mm-hmm.
structure of the system prevents people from being able to act in a manner that actually solves problems, right? So, and
Yeah.
this, that's at the hospital level, that's in, the ministry offices and stuff like that. So, like, you talk about that bridge program. Seems like a pretty straightforward idea to me, right? Like, doesn't
Yeah.
seem that complicated, but we just why is it that we have so little ability to just do the easy things? Like, why do we make the easy things hard?
I don't.
I
It's
think I
it's
think a big part of it is I think I notice this a lot when I come back to Canada and have conversations with people. The US is the problem with the US is that there are things that are going great and then there's things that are going horribly. And then within things that are going great or horribly, there's inevitably like something that's doing really well, there's like a really bad portion. And then something that's doing poorly, there's like a really good portion. Right. And so what this ends up happening for a lot of Canadian political conversations, where I think you do need to mobilize the country to act together. Well, first, obviously, like the federal government is a lot weaker than most other countries, period, right? Because so much of power, money, and authority is given to the provinces. And that's the nature of the confederation that was built. So that's where it starts. And then, second, anytime someone suggests something bold or radical, it's usually been tried already in the US to some level of success or failure, and then the detractors of the plan can just simply point out, hey, look what's happening down there. That's really bad. And then you can always find something bad, right? It doesn't matter what situation it is, you can always find something bad. And I think, something that my fiance is from Austria. So they have fantastic healthcare. On a whole, the healthcare system is pretty good. And but what they do have is it's not a two-tier system, but you do have copays. And then one of our good friends, Will, from high school, Theo, he lives in Norway, which is again considered to be a really strong country for healthcare, right? And they also have certain levels of private participation. And like, I completely understand why Canadians are so allergic to the idea of private participation in healthcare because, like, living in the US, I'm telling you, like, it sucks. Like, I don't want this, right? And if you actually look at the states with the best quality of living, there's a lot of healthcare offerings for people. So, for example, in the state of New Jersey, if you are if you're below the poverty level in New Jersey, you actually have free healthcare. So there's multiple states where that exists already. I think Massachusetts as well. California has
Gary,
Medi-Cal, I
Gary,
think it's called.
I'm getting.
Yeah,
Let me jump in for a second. Like,
yeah,
I don't think obviously I'm in the retirement home business, so that's a private that's private participation in healthcare, right? We're
Mm.
adjacent to the long-term care industry. And what I would say is that the problem with Canada and privatization, it's Canada has like the worst parts of capitalism, right? Like I saw a
Yeah,
video on this. Like it's like we get the worst of capitalism and the worst of socialism. Like we just
definitely.
go try
Yeah. You have the worst of all
to
worlds instead of the best of all worlds.
right. So like in the US, yeah, like there's a lot of entities that it's a real rock and roll business environment. Things can happen, right? Here, like, look at the retirement home industry, where in Ontario, you have a crippling shortage of long-term care beds. And if we went into a Econ 101 class right now in any school in the country, they would tell you, well, if there's a shortage, you know what? The market entrants will join and will the shortage will be filled, right? Like, there's no shortage of Tim Hortons in Canada, is there? Right? Is there like there's no shortage of Starbucks, or we can go down the list. But the reason we have shortages, like again, when you talk about assets and things of these natures, like in Canada, everything is it's all oligopoly, right? It's all cartel
Yeah.
economics, right? So uh, there's a shortage because on the private side, the largest operators own 80 plus percent of the beds, right? And they're the ones that have the access to the financing, the ability to mobilize and create the beds. And guess what? It's in their interest for a shortage to exist because there's natural upward pressure on prices. And that's
Mm.
the truth. Like, that's why, right? So, long term care, nobody built beds for 20 something years, right? The economics were all screwed up. They offered subsidies. Guess what? Overnight, everybody said, "Oh, I'm submitting for licenses. We're gonna go build beds, right? Because we're handing out cash, right?" So, like right now, there's capture, and what we really need is the ability. Now, I'm not going to argue for it could be for anybody because it's all hands on deck. What we really need is the ability for qualified individuals to go out and do something. Right now, if you're a nurse in Ontario and you wanted to set up, there's actually zoning in Toronto that allows what's known as a seniors community house. Any residential home in Ontario can open up the equivalent of an Alexis Lodge, 10 beds to a home to take care of seniors in a fast moving political environment, we would say, "Hey, I'm going to support any nurse that wants to do this. Right? I'll give you funding. I'll help you. You need funding for sprinklers to do it. You need access to financing, whatever. I'll do it because we need the beds right now." But we don't come up with ideas like that. And maybe again, I don't necessarily want to criticize people or whatever, but I mean, I
I mean, I
think
think we
we
should
could do a
criticize
lot
people.
more. Well, the
I
thing
think we
is that
should.
you criticize people, you'd be surprised. Like you'd be surprised. Even me, I'm a small guy, right? Like we put out the idea for that next generation dementia care home, and I was actually surprised that people in BC were through a major competitor of ours had actually heard about it. And I was like, what do you mean? Why do you know what I'm doing? And it's like, oh, yeah, people talk, right? And government people are sensitive and stuff like that. So, unfortunately, you get put on the blacklist, things don't go in your favor because there's a lot of sensitivity instead of looking at it like I looked at healthcare like, wow, we're doing stuff to help people's lives. We're all on deck. Things are gonna, everything's gonna move. It doesn't move. It really doesn't.
Well, I think you bring up a good point in the sense of, hey, there's a lot of opportunity for people to get involved in this industry, right? And it's kind of like why I'm here in California right now. I don't live here. I'm just here for a couple of weeks, and I'm just really trying to. Yeah, I think in Canada we need to bring back more so entrepreneurial culture, and what I mean by that is not that people can't start businesses because some of the greatest business people I've ever met were either trained, born, or educated in Canada, right? But I feel like, even when I talk to my own mom, who's been in business for a very long time, and she's been living in Aurora for over, I think, 15, 20 years now. And I think she has so much to offer. And I'm trying to encourage her, hey, you can do this, you can do that. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of people, especially some of these younger kids that I'm trying to mentor and help them start their own businesses, for some reason or another, just mentally speaking, they feel like I can't, I can't do it. And even if I could, I can't do it here. Right. And that's why a lot of um, I think if you look at the job market and if you look at the economy, a lot of really valuable companies in the US, based here, paying taxes here, are actually founded by Canadians. And these are people who get kind of lured when they're in their early 20s or right after university. And they get a really big paycheck. I'm actually talking to one uh, third year, I think, no, fourth year Waterloo student who is going to get a full time offer from Microsoft. And but what he really wants to do is start his own company. But the money that's being offered here in the US is so high that he's like, okay, well, I'm probably going to take the Microsoft offer. And once he takes the offer, and if he comes to Seattle or wherever, you know, and when he decides to actually start his company, he's not going to go back home, right? And I don't know I don't know what can be done. And I think there needs to be more encouragement of entrepreneurship because I think in the there's a lot of misconceptions. It is true that there's a lot of really, really abusive companies here in the US. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of examples of that, but there's actually robust competition, right? Like you mentioned the oligopolies earlier. You know, like if you think grocery stores, right? I didn't even know this, but some, even Chinese grocery stores like T&T are owned by Loblaws, right? And anytime something new comes in, they end up acquiring it and then they hold, okay, oh, you want to boycott Loblaws? Okay, good luck. Just don't eat. That's the best way to boycott, right? Like
It's okay. They
there's
should say, don't go to Loblaws, go to TNT. It's okay.
yeah, you know, so so the thing is like I, there needs to be a mental change of people taking bigger risks and understanding, hey, if I take risks, there's adequate rewards for that risk too, right? And I think if you want to talk about, who's supposed to change this, the government's supposed to do this. The government's supposed to make it easier to start a business, for people to just start doing things, get experience. Because the one thing about starting your own business is that you will never be trained for, right? Because there's so many things that you don't even realize. Like, for example, I was trying to design my own website. I was like, oh my God, how do I even do, like, what color should I pick? What font? And these are like these little things that you only learn with experience. And
Well, I'm
if you
gonna
want to,
I'm gonna interrupt for a second if that's
yeah,
okay, Jared. Like,
yeah,
and I'll come back to the point. Like, look, I think business is really important. I don't. It's a balance. Like, I think the government's there to correct market failures, right? But I think what's happening. You brought up the point of abuse, right? We are, I guess, as a population, being abused in this
abused.
context, and but it leaves people to find alternative options. And I think one thing that we're seeing, again, the rise of the wellness industry and different mindsets. And I just want to bring up the confirmation of RFK Jr. Down in the States for the role of the HHS secretary, right? And I think that's a reflection of a lot of the frustration and again, people, if you're not going to give me the way to go this way, I have to find a way anyways, right? So, and now other voices come out. So, I know Lydia, like, what do you think? I know you have a lot of experience with
Mm.
the mindsets and stuff like that, and a perspective on that. Like, what do you think? Seeing RFK get confirmed the other day. Oh, you're on mute. I think you're yeah, you're on mute. Lydia, you're on mute. Oh, she can't hear me.
Lydia, can you hear us?
You're on
Oh,
mute.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
Sorry. I just
No
didn't want all
worries.
the background noise being picked up and then I forgot I did that.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem.
for those that don't know, like I used to be a very crunchy holistic mom and I didn't vaccinate my kids and I was like really into like supplements and I have like a really severe autoimmune disease that, and I had a few really bad encounters with healthcare, which kind of drove me the other way. And that's what's happening to people, right? Is they're being disenfranchised with evidence-based medicine because the system is terrible, not that evidence-based medicine is terrible necessarily, right? But people are getting fed up, and then you have people that are predatory stepping in and offering another way, and that way often doesn't work, and it often is blamed on the client themselves, like you're contaminating with gluten, you're this, you're that, try this, add this supplement, add this. It's always your fault, it's never them when you encounter these charlatans. And so they're more than willing to take your money until you have none left. And
Yeah.
this happens to a lot of people, and actually it gets to the point where it messes even with your psychology. There's like eating disorders that can arise from it called orthorexia. People can get something called parasitosis, where they think everything is from parasites. They're trying everything to kill the parasites in their body, and they're consuming toxic things to try to kill their parasites. Like, it's on the extreme end of things, it causes a lot of harm that people don't really realize, because when you go to their sites, they're not going to have these people that share that negative experience. It's like, I tried this and I felt better. Meanwhile, there's like a placebo effect, and then also like a healthy lifestyle effect. Of course, you feel better. You're drinking more water. You're going for walks. Yeah, cleared the processed food out of your diet. You're gonna feel better, okay? And that's not because you took turmeric. It's because you made a bunch of changes that were positive. But I have a lot, a lot of
No,
opinions on
yeah,
this subject.
yeah.
This whole like him being like lauded by these people because they're disenfranchised and they've been offered something better, and they really want to believe that that something is better. What they don't understand is, in addition to vaccination, RFK and his people are also going to come after fortification programs. They always talk about that as something like that is poison and toxic. Folate fortification, iodine fortification, iron fortification. All of these things decrease birth defects and bring up the population's IQ. That is a fact. Like, iodine fortification brought up, I can't remember by how many IQ points it brought up the average IQ in the US, because iodine deficiency on the extreme end causes something called cretinism, but also just reduces your IQ in general. Like, it affects the unborn child. So like, they're going to go after these programs that have actually made the United States a better place, and they're going to go after everything. And when they say like that whole paradigm is that your bad health is your fault, it's so they're not going to offer a good alternative. They're just going to say, well, you don't get health care because you eat too much McDonald's. You don't get health care because you smoke. You don't get health care. And that insurance companies on some level already enable that, but it's going to be worse. It's going to be much worse, and people are literally going to die because of this man. He wants to go after the FDA, and dismantle that as well. People don't realize that the FDA keeps them safe. When drug companies are caught doing bad things, it's because the FDA works. You can't catch people doing bad things if there are no rules against those bad things. So like, oh my god, I'm going off on a rant now, but
No,
that's
it's great.
No,
that
it's
it
really
is
good.
scary. It is
Yeah.
so scary what this man is going to do to America. People have no idea.
I feel like a big problem right now in global discourse is just there's a general lack of trust, right? So especially in traditional uh, in traditional knowledge, right? Basically anything that has happened the way it has been for a very long time, people are like, wait, why is it this way? It's, people are like keeping us down. What are they hiding from us, type of thing. And I don't know, Lydia, I would love to hear your thoughts on like, what do you think? What can be done to restore trust, right? Because clearly you have to change your system awareness of what you think, what information is correct, what isn't. Like how did you decide what to trust in the first place, and then what leads you to have changed your mind, and how do you engage and encourage others to have trust? Because I think
Yeah.
trust is at the heart of all these problems. Like we don't trust the government to fix the oligopolies. To like I think at the heart of it is just there's a huge lack of trust.
It starts like I do a lot of travel right now because I talk about how a bad encounter with a nurse affected my views on vaccination. I used to be a quality control chemist for a pharmaceutical company. Oddly enough, I used to work in a manufacturing plant, and then when I had kids, I settled down, became a stay-at-home mom, and I fully planned on vaccinating my child, and she had a reaction that I wasn't prepared for. I don't think I actually ever heard her cry before then, really. And I called the nurse the following morning after being up with her all night as she screamed, and she basically said, "You're just a first-time mom, and if you really thought something was wrong, you would go to the ER. But it sounds fine to me." And it was very dismissive and embarrassing, and just
Mm,
like a
it's
really
rude.
negative experience, and didn't answer my questions of like, why is this happening to my child? And this was back in 2008, so a while ago. So I went online, and forums were a thing. It wasn't Facebook and all that. It was mostly like online forums. And the one I went to was called mothering.com, and it was a natural parenting site. And they had helped me when another doctor couldn't help me breastfeed my child. They had helped me breastfeed my child. Like I was having issues with that. And so they earned my trust there because they were right. The information that they gave me helped me breastfeed my child. And so I went back to that group and I was like, my daughter, I don't know what happened. I vaccinated her. And this is when they told me about the inserts and this side effect called DTaP cry, and her brain was probably inflamed. And they just don't want to admit that this happens to children. And sure enough, you look in the insert, and there is such a thing in the insert, but people don't tell you is that was grandfathered in from the old DTP shots, and they just kind of like, hey, if this happens, talk to your doctor. Well, I never talked to my doctor about it. I just went to the internet, and they what they said scared the shit out of me. So I stopped vaccinating my child, and at first I was just gonna split them up, and then after being in this group, I kind of became radicalized. Like over time, because like there was a sense of community there that wasn't in my own community, and I built a trust with these women, and so yeah, I stayed like that for like a long time. It affected not only my kids' health because they were never vaccinated, but my own health. I started trying to cure my Crohn's disease with natural medicine through perfectionism, and just slowly cutting everything out of my diet. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was scrawny. I just thought I wasn't trying hard enough because that's their motto is like, it's your fault you're sick.
Mm,
And you're not trying hard enough. You're not excluding enough. You're not taking enough supplements. You're not whatever. So it becomes this hamster wheel that you just can't get off. There's the whole sunk cost fallacy of it all. If you put like $10,000 over the years into methodology, you're going to want to see it pay off, and so you're not going to walk away. So it's a multi-layered thing that kind of keeps you stuck there. And so now, back to the original question, I now
Hold on.
travel talking to
I just
doctors.
want to make a note because I made this a
Oh,
live event. This might shut off on the hour.
okay.
I just want to but this is really good. I want you to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So now I
please.
travel, I talk with nonprofits to talk to doctors and nurses like, listen, what you say can impact people and send them on a path that you will have a hard time turning them back from. It took me this many years to come back to evidence-based medicine, realize it's an imperfect system, and these are the conversations that help me, because ever since like I came out of this, I've had lots of wonderful conversations with doctors and nurses and scientists that want to, share, explain how the hierarchy of evidence works, explain how, what evidence-based medicine actually means, and how we can determine what works and what doesn't. And yeah, so I kind of came full circle, to realize like, yeah, I should vaccinate my kids. I caught up all my kids on their vaccinations. Um, they are not damaged by that in any way. They're just now protected against measles, so that's good. And I have a son who's actually was autistic before his vaccinations. He didn't get autism from vaccines. He was
Mhm.
fully unvaccinated till he was almost 5, and his autism symptoms showed up around the age of 2.5, 3. So that was another lie. I believed that if I just didn't vaccinate my kids, they wouldn't be autistic, but that's not true.
I think what you bring up that's really good and I think just I think these kind of conversations are an example of that. I think something Canada can be really strong at is building trust, right? Because I think our society is tolerant to respect. And it's a really important part. I think so. I've lived in a lot of places, and I am closer and closer. I'm trying to like plan to move home right now because that's the kind of culture that I've been really missing when I live south, or even when I live overseas. I've also lived in Europe, and I grew up in China, and I think just the mutual respect that people have when you when there is that expectation of respect and then someone breaks that, with the comments that the doctor gave to you back then, I think that's a really jarring experience, right? It's, hey, I'm expecting things to happen a certain way, and ultimately at the end of the day, well, first it's really good to hear that you're talking to these people and letting them know the impact of their words, but at the end of the day, like doctors and nurses are also just people, and people can sometimes be grumpy, and I think regardless of what job someone has, it's really hard to always keep the happy face that is that makes people feel good. And if we can build a society which we understand we are all flawed, and we can accept those flaws but also do our best to prevent them wherever we can or mitigate the impacts of those, I think that could be that could I think that's definitely somewhere where Canadian culture leads, right? It's just respect for others. And
Yeah,
and yeah, I don't
well,
know.
and
Well, go ahead.
no, Jerry, I think that's a great point. I just think part of it is transitioning our society from, I mean, look at the growth in education and the internet, the access to information has increased so
Yeah.
much in the past 100 years, and it's hard, for a doctor, or anybody like in this day and age. Sure, I'm not a doctor, and then I go in, I'm trying to tell a doctor something, but and I understand why that's difficult, but it's important that in this day and age, like we can't be in the ivory tower. We have to be able to talk and communicate. You're the expert, but the point of communication is getting your message across, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be a bigger part of medicine going forward. Now, in case this does shut off, I do want to get everyone's final comments, and I see Ash's comments in there about autism, and I agree. Like, look at some of the stats, like Trump saying, "Oh my gosh, we have so much of a higher rate of autism." Again, were we measuring autism at that time? Were people trying to diagnose it? In
Did we
comparison, it's
know
like
really
nobody
what it
was
was?
autistic before, right?
And
Like,
they've broadened the spectrum of what
yeah.
autism means. So, like,
Hmm.
the kids that we thought were kind of weirdos or whatever, a long time ago, those kids are they're autistic. That's why we thought they were strange. And now it's like there's an understanding. Like my son can go to a school dance and he's not made fun of, because the kids all know about him and they love him. They love him for who he is because there's an understanding. But it's hard. People fear what they don't understand. So those kids used to get outcasted, but now it's better for them. Like I remember the first school dance he went to, I was like, I'm so scared. But he had so much fun. And the kids, he's not able to form friendships the same way other kids do, but they do appreciate him for who he is, and
Yeah,
he likes being around them too.
that's right. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you for joining us today, Lydia.
Thank you
This has
so
been
much.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
this was
I could
so
go on
good.
for another
I
two
know.
hours. You have
I
no
would love
idea.
to
You bring me
continue.
back, I'll go on.
Yeah, let's do it again. Let's do it
I
again.
can talk a lot.
No, no. Well, clearly both of us can too. So
That's why people pay me to talk.
That's good.
It's not payment, it's an honorarium. It's a gift.
there you go. Yeah.
Before
So
anyone calls me a grifter.
no. Oh yeah. Well, we
Yeah.
ignore the haters. But
Yeah.
this has been great. This has been the first episode of We'll Do It Live, and we'll do it again soon. Thanks for
Yeah.
everybody who
Thanks for
watched.
having me. That was
Yes,
great.
thanks for
Yeah.
the audience too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Ash.
guys.
Yeah, love the comments. We'll let you know
Yeah.
when we're on next. All right.
Cool.
Bye,
All
everybody.
right. Have a good
Bye.
one, guys. Bye.